Hey Tamers, welcome back to Kizuna Games, coming at you today with our first place MirageGaogamon build. This is a really popular deck of the format, so you're definitely going to see a lot of similar ways to build this, with a few options for spice you could throw in here and there. But let's talk about what I played and what some things I plan on changing. So starting with the level 2s, of course, we will be playing 4 copies of Wanyamon from BT11. This is the go-to egg for a lot of blue builds, and Mirage is no exception. Inheritable when attacking. If you have a blue tamer in play, draw 1 card. Nice and simple, easy to meet, and very important since we'll be playing a lot of tamers in this deck. Next, we'll be playing 4 copies of Gaomon from BT11. Gaomon has a on-play effect. Reveal top 3 cards of your deck. Add 1 Digimon card with Gaogamon in its name, and 1 blue tamer card among them to your hand, and then you trash the rest, which is pretty weird for a blue searching card, especially since the deck does nothing with its trash at the moment. It has the inheritable of when attacking once per turn. If you have a tamer in play, return 1 of your opponent's level 3 Digimon back to their hand, helping fuel our deck strat. For our next level 3, we're playing 3 copies of Gaomon from EX4. This is our second best Gaomon, maybe our first depending on the context of the board state. On play, both players draw a top card of their deck. It has an inheritable that when in effect adds cards to your opponent's hand, gain 1 memory, can really help us space out our turns much better. Our last level 3, rounding out to 12, is Gaomon from BT13. This Gaomon has a when attacking effect, both players draw 1 card from their decks. With an inheritable that all turns, while your opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand, this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP. I do find this to be the weakest of the rookie lineup, but it's not without its uses. Sometimes having that extra K DP on all turns can help us stay alive in some situations, particularly if we're going for a blocker strat for the turn, but we'll talk more into that later. Returning for our level 4s is 2 copies of Gaogamon from BT11. Gaogamon has a when attacking effect. If your opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand, gain 1 memory. Its inheritable is when attacking. If you have a tamer in play, return 1 of your opponent's level 3 Digimon to the owner's hand. Same effect as the level 3. Very rarely do you get to pop off both of them in a single move, but you never know. D-Brigade does exist. For our main level 4, we are running 4 copies of Gaogamon from BT13. When Digivolving, if you don't have a Thomas, you may play a Thomas from your hand without paying the cost, helping us get that early tamer set up. And then it also has the inheritable of if your alterns. If your opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand, this Digimon gains 1000 DP. Not a super relevant inheritable. This is definitely something I want to see early and get moving with it. Afterwards, it's just to evolve into raising to get to our 5s. Now, my favorite level 4 of this set is Gaogamon from EX4. When Digivolving, return 1 of your opponent's level 3 Digimon to the owner's hand. And then it has the inheritable of your turn once per turn. When in effect adds cards to your opponent's hand, gain 1 memory. So this is a fantastic early move up card. A lot of people will play their level 3s for searching on the first or second turns, and we can move up our raising or play off of our own search to bounce that searcher back to their hand, keeping their hand size nice and big and removing some board pressure. Its inheritable, of course, also helps us really space out the memory gain to keep our turn as we're doing our combos. For the level 5, we're playing 4 copies of MachGaogamon from BT11. This is our main go-to level 5. When Digivolving until the end of your opponent's turn, this Digimon gains blocker and then plus 2000 DP for every 4 cards in the hand. That blocking can really help make sure we're keeping some extra protection on the reverse turn, making sure our opponent doesn't get any cheeky last swings in. It has a all turns inheritable. When in effect adds cards to your opponent's hand, unsuspend this Digimon. Now this is not an optional effect, so you want to trigger this in a way where you are going to get the unsuspend worth of it. Ideally, you'll be swinging with the MachGaogamon. That's where the extra DP gains can come in handy when we're going into security, or we have alternative means of safely swinging when we get into the tamer lineup as well. For our other level 5, we're running 3 copies of MachGaogamon from EX4. This has a when Digivolving effect to return one of your opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon back to their hand. It's a really good bounce effect for the 5 to have. I really like it for applying some of the extra pressure, again, to remove Digimon from the board, kind of keep it clear. It has inheritable of when attacking, if your opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand, unsuspend this Digimon. This is a nice, good alternative inheritable for our 6s. In case we're not really in the position to be balancing cards for some reason, we can at least guarantee that we're unsuspending anyways by them having a hand size. 8 cards is pretty easy to meet by late game most of the time. And it's also not dependent on our other effects like the last one, so we don't have to make sure we're suspended already before going into our 6 to utilize it. Now, the first possible edit of the deck here, the only 5 that I'm not running is the BT13 MachGaogamon. It has a when Digivolving effect that this Digimon's attack cannot be redirected, getting around things like blockers and Machinegermon's Analog Man, or Black Wargreymmon's effect. Its inheritable is the same as BT11's when an effect adds cards to your opponent's hand, unsuspend. So a similar strat to the BT11 one, but getting around blockers. I initially didn't have any because I did not play against really any blocker-oriented style of decks in my initial testings of it. Since then, I have played against things like Royal Knights that do run blockers and have found that it could definitely come up, so I'm thinking about teching in a copy or two somewhere. It's definitely something that could come up, so consider maybe spacing your deck for a copy or two. But otherwise, in those niche situations, I do think that these two offer more value. For our main level 6, we are running 3 copies of MirageGaogamon from BT11. This is our main go-to card. When Digivolving for 4, return one of your opponent's level 5 or lower Digimon to the owner's hand. If no Digimon was returned by this effect, your opponent adds the top card of security stack to their hand. This goes well with the MachGaogamon we talked about earlier, where no matter what we get into this card, we are adding a card to your opponent's hand, whether it be their Digimon or their security. This will automatically trigger this inheritable, so you do want MachGaogamon to be suspended when you go into it. If you happen to be into the other one though, it does not matter. And actually, if you happen to be in this one though, you want to stay unsuspended, so that way you can get the when attacking effect. His secondary effect is all turns. When an effect adds cards to your opponent's hand, gain 1 memory for every 4 cards in our opponent's hand. So this is how we're hopefully evolving into a 5 and then to our 6 in the same turn and keeping turn, using the level 3 and 4 inheritable memory gains, plus the Digimon, plus maybe some tamers. We are hoping to gain a bunch of memory by going into our 6 and coming out net positive, allowing us then to put on pressure on top from there and kind of control the tempo of the turn. And because it is all turns, it does work on our opponent's turn as well. If they activate any kind of searcher cards or tamer cards, anything outside of the draw phase in evolutions to gain cards, we will be gaining memory, reducing their options, and maybe even passing turn. For our other level 6, we are running 3 copies of the new BT13 MirageGaogamon. So it is also a 4-cost evolve. It has the evade ability when this Digimon would be deleted. You may suspend it to prevent that deletion. And then when Digivolving, return one of your opponent's tamers to the hand. This is a wonderful counter card in this meta with all the burst mode decks running around. We can get rid of tamers, preventing our rivals from doing their own burst mode tactics. It can also be nice to disrupt memory distribution. If we're at 3, we evolve for 4, we can bounce a memory corrector to hand, choking them at 1 and making them lose all that momentum from having played that tamer to begin with. And then it has an all turns effect. When an effect adds a card to your opponent's hand, you may play 1 Thomas from your hand without paying its cost, which is a really nice, again, spit in the face, using that to bounce an opponent's tamer so we can play our own tamer and then begin our own burst mode combo. I had a Shine Greymon game where I was able to use this effect twice, back to back, on my turn and then opponent's turn, and get out 2 Thomas out of it, which was pretty nice. Now, this would be probably my second main edit of the deck. While I like to play new cards at a higher ratio to test them out and get a feel for them, I have found, and you'll find this as most people agree, I don't like the new Mirage compared to old Mirage. Bouncing a tamer with no memory gain is a little bit more restrictive than bouncing a 5 or lower or security and then memory gain. So I do find that the BT11 MirageGaogamon is still the preferred 6 to go into, but the Tamer Bouncer one is still pretty good for removing some options for your opponent, especially if you have the time to wait another turn to set up for an even bigger combo. That being said, I will be bumping up the BT11 Mirage to 4 and dropping this one down to 2 copies, and we'll play with that and see how that feels. Now for our level 7s of the deck, there really is only one option, MirageGaogamon Burst Mode from BT13. It is a 5 evolve cost, but who really pays that? We will be using Burst Digivolve, the new mechanic from this set, to 0 evolve on top of a MirageGaogamon by returning a Thomas to our hand. At the end of the turn, this card will be trashed, reverting back into the level 6. It has a when Digivolving effect, return one of your opponent's Digimon to their hand, and then gain 1 memory for every 4 cards in opponent's hand. So after we do all that memory gain with the BT11 Mirage, we will be evolving for 0 and getting even more memory off of the burst mode, allowing us to play other options such as more tamers to continue our combos. And because of the nature of the bouncing effects, the level 5 has a potential to bounce a level 4, the level 6 bounces a 5, and the burst mode bounces anything. Kind of guarantees that no matter what our opponent has on the field, barring any protections, we'll be removing those Digimon. It has a when attacking effect if your opponent has 9 or more cards in their hand by choosing cards in your opponent's hand without looking and returning them to the bottom of the deck so that 8 remain. Unsuspend this Digimon. So burst mode will be a multi-attacker. It can definitely go for OTK builds. There's no security attack +1 in this current build, but if you get some early cheeky checks or you just have enough looping, you can really just clear out all security in one go. 15k DP, this Digimon isn't dying too much, although it can happen. It can definitely still hit security bombs. Option card removal is a real threat. Now we will go into our tamers immediately for the looping effect. We are running 4 copies of the new BT13 Thomas. Thomas has start of your turn. If you have 2 or fewer memory, set it to 3, so we finally have a natural memory corrector for the deck. And when one of your Digimon with Gaomon or Gaogamon in its name attacks, by suspending this tamer, both players draw 1 card from their decks. This tamer guarantees that we can force our opponents to draw cards to trigger our mini effects, but most importantly with burst mode, after we drop them down to 8 cards and unsuspend, we can swing once more and suspend a Thomas to have them draw 9 cards, triggering the effect to bottom deck one of them and unsuspend again. And we can do that again for each Thomas, because again it's not once per turn, so we will be unsuspending at least 4 times, and that's not even counting any level 5 inheritable unsuspend effects that we have or any further tamer unsuspends. Because we are also running 2 copies of BT14, we are also running 2 copies of BT4 Thomas. On play, trigger draw 1 card, which is kind of nice, but main effect, if your opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand, you may suspend this tamer to unsuspend one of your Digimon with Gaomon in its name, allowing us to do further unsuspend effects without needing to interact with our opponent's hand. Now with all these wild swings into security, especially from some of the earlier levels like the level 5, we want to make sure we're having the best chance of survival, so we are running 3 copies of Nicolai. Start of main phase, one of our Digimon with Gaomon or Gaogamon in its name gains jamming, preventing it to die from higher DP in security battles. It has a your turn effect when it adds cards to your opponent's hand by suspending this tamer, gain 1 memory. I definitely like to see it early. I love to hard play it and then evolve into a Gaogamon right afterwards to cheat out a free Thomas. That way we only had to play a 3-cost tamer and then we get a free 4-cost tamer. Get the double tamer out pretty quickly. And of course the extra memory gain on our turn further goes into helping us keep turn without having to invest too hard. Allows us to keep turn while going through our evolutions. I'm not sure if I would want to edit any tamer ratios for sure, the new Thomas I definitely like to keep at 4 at this time. If anything, I would maybe want to sneak in an extra copy of Thomas, possibly cutting a Nicolai, but I can't say I'm really happy with that answer at the moment. Namely being in matches such as Royal Knights, so depending on how much I plan to actually play against Royal Knights, it can really depend on that. But Royal Knights has the card Alphamon, which stops my level 6s and higher from attacking. It has that on-play effect that Digimon with play cost 10 or higher can't attack. But when you have a level 5 with jamming that keeps unsuspending, who needs level 6s? That uniquely allows the level 5s to keep pressure in that game and not be halted completely by the Royal Knight stuff. And if you combine that with the other MachGaogamon that can't be redirected, you're not even worried if they're also playing a blocker as well, allowing the level 5 to just keep checking security for each Thomas you have, which is pretty funny. And finally, because you know I like to test out new cards, we are running 3 copies of Full Moon Meteor Impact. This is Blue's new removal card. It is actually pretty good. It is a 8 cost, but return one of your opponent's Digimon to their hand, and then gain 1 memory for every 4 cards in their hand, potentially making this a really cheap hard removal card. I did have a game where I pretty much played this thing for 4 cost, which was really nice. And it has just a security effect to return one of your opponent's Digimon to their hand. So this is essentially really buffed up Kakaida's Breath, if you're aware of Kakaida's Breath. This is just really good generic blue removal card. I definitely like it. It almost never comes up to security, because why would it? If we're going to talk about option card edits, we have to talk about Sorai. Sorai is a blue option card that strips sources from your opponent's Digimon, and then Digimon without sources cannot attack. That card is very, very good in this format, being able to stop things like Belphamon, Royal Knights, Shine Greymon with their Marcus swings, things of that nature. It's definitely something I am going to need to put in this deck if I want to continue to play it at a meta level. It's something I will probably be adding. At the moment, I'm thinking of maybe taking out 2 full moons and putting in 2 Sorais and just having 1 full moon, because I still really like the card. I don't want to get rid of it, but we gotta fit in the Sorai somewhere. Alright, but hey, that is my MirageGaogamon deck for this format. I've always been interested in playing Mirage since his early days, but it is nice with him having full support now that we don't have to do a lot of roundabout ways of building it. We can just build a true Mirage deck, and it's actually so good. It's such a good deck, this format. I really enjoy playing it. If you want to see some gameplay of this deck, check out my latest video where I have a play-by-play versus a Ravemon burst mode. It's a really good video, really proud of it. Otherwise, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for future Digimon content, and I'll catch you guys next time. Have a good night.